us today to learn more of you, and then to share what we learned, to share you with the world. In Jesus' name. What I learned in Cuba, you know, when Ann gets up and talks about some of the problems, not just in our city, but really any city in the world, it's almost like, where is the hope? Well, that's one of the biggest lessons I learned when I was in Cuba, and that is hope. There is hope. I'll give you a quick rundown of the where and the who and the why. I was in Cuba, tell you a couple stories, and then wrap it up with this thing called hope. So I went to Cuba, and this is where Cuba is. It's about 95 to 100 miles south of Florida. Real short plane trip. It's one of those flights where as soon as you reach altitude, they're asking you to put your tray tables up and your seat in the upright position, and you got to chug down the cup of 7-Up or water they gave you because it's time to descend. About a 40-minute flight from Miami to Havana. We actually didn't land in Havana. We landed in a place called Camagüey, and you probably can't see my little laser on the monitor, but Camagüey is in the lower right-hand corner there. Camagüey is where we landed. We went from there to a place called Holguín, which is the furthest east, and then we went all the way back past Camagüey to Ciego de Avila, which is just above where it says Cuba. Then we backtracked to a place called Las Tunas. We went from Las Tunas to Cienfuegos. I have a couple pictures of Cienfuegos. It's a little city on a bay off of the Caribbean Sea. And then from Cienfuegos, we went to Havana. So over the 7 days, 7 nights, we were in 5 different hotels. 6 different hotels, I think it was. We didn't stay in one place too long. So we went to Cuba. Just above Cuba is the Bahamas, and just a little bit to the east and barely south is Haiti and Dominican Republic. So really Cuba's not that far away. We don't hear a lot about Cuba much. They kind of keep to themselves, and since we have an embargo against them, we kind of keep them at arm's length as well. So I was absolutely blessed to be able to go to Cuba. And you may wonder why Cuba. I was wondering that myself. My stepbrother Shad asked me a number of months ago if I would like to go on a mission trip to Cuba. He had gone the previous year, and I was like, something different, something exciting, a change, an adventure. I'm up for that, but Cuba? And I want you to ask yourself this question: where would you like to go on a mission trip? Hawaii? People in Hawaii need Jesus, right? Yeah. People in Fiji and people on a Caribbean cruise need Jesus, right? You know, that's where I'd like to go on a mission trip. But Cuba? Why did we go to Cuba? But first, before why, I think I have a picture of the who. There were 15 of us, and those 4 made up a number of 15. That's the good-looking guy. Without the hat is me. The good-looking guy with the hat is my brother-in-law. Did I say stepbrother?
Yeah.
He's not a stepbrother.
We got you.
I'm all excited. It's my brother-in-law, Shad. A lot of you know him. He's been here before with my younger sister, Jennifer, on his left, and then their daughter, Amy, who's 15. The group we went with has been going to Cuba for 10 or 15 years, and Amy is the youngest one they've ever taken to Cuba on a trip like this. And this is in Havana, and it's in a square where there's a cathedral, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. So there were 4 of us. I didn't get the picture from the person who took the whole group shot, so I don't have a group shot yet. When I get that, I'll show it during announcements one week. But here are the ladies that were on the trip. Aiden there, and on her left is a gal named Barbara. Barbara and Lana on the far right, I guess on your left, is it not working?
You're not on.
I'm not on.
It's not. The speaker or the lobby.
It's not? Well, that's a bummer.
Say it, talk now.
Talk now. Check, 1, 2. It's just my own. Check. You know, we need to get this thing. Let's take this thing together. Check. Still not.
I'm sorry. They can't hear you out there. Test.
Check. Well, now I can't use my hand. Hang on 1 second. everybody hit pause. Close your eyes. Your commercial break. Yeah, I'm going to try. So when I got this new head horn set, I was really excited because the other head horn, like the flock, would be this thing. It was only one-sided. This I can hang on my ears. There's plenty of ear to hang it on. But it's like Camden says, buy nice or buy twice, right? So I wanted to save money, so I got the kind where it comes with a lot of different connections instead of the solid state one where it's really good and more expensive. Because of that, check. Just use Ann. Ann says just use Ann. Anyway, because there's a connections get loose, and when they get loose, they don't work. And you gotta start all over again. No, it's just not connecting for some
So
reason.
review for John.
John said, no, you only gave me 15 minutes. If I review, I lose all that. So I am being recorded on the pad back here, so that's good. And then a gal named Laura and Yolanda. So those were the ladies on the trip. And here's a few others. We were in the streets of Havana. We weren't tourists because we were on a religious visa. But when we went to Havana, we had an afternoon off, and you could just see us. We're tourists. You know, picture. So there's Jennifer, and Walter was one of the translators. Bob works for Joshua Nations. Yolanda, Alex is a translator. Alex and Walter live in Cuba. Raimundo is a pastor in Cuba. And he came over for SCP SoCal and spent a few days in New York and Denver and a few other things on his own mission fundraising trip. Laura's in the back there, and then a guy named Martin. And we have James and another guy named Robert as well. So there were about 15 of us. We went with a group called Joshua Nations, which is based in Arvada, Colorado. And Joshua Nations exists to proclaim the saving grace of Jesus to the world and disciple believers to a vibrant relationship with His truth. And they accomplish that by training leaders to establish Bible training centers all across the world. Now, when I think of a Bible training center or a Bible school, I kind of think of a storefront and a building and a place. But really, a Bible training center is just a group of people in a particular church that want to go through the curriculum that they have developed over the years. Joshua Nations began in 2006 with an ambitious vision to go to the nations, and the Lord has blessed them with tremendous momentum and growth, and you can see just how much momentum and growth they have. Over 141,000 students around the world, 6,075 schools, in other words, groups that have gathered together to go through the curriculum together, in 38 nations, in 40 languages. Now, Cuba has 77 schools or churches that have people going through the curriculum. And what Joshua Nations does is they go to a number of different nations, specifically Cuba. I think the president of Joshua Nations is going to be in Uganda here in a little bit. But we go over and they ask for those who want to be a part of the team to go over and graduate students who have been through the curriculum. And there were over 1,000 people who graduated on our trip. Now, there were 1,000 names on the graduation list. Not all of them actually received their diploma, at least not yet, not until they can make it into church. But some of these people live in far-flung areas of Cuba, and transportation is an issue. Not everyone has a car, and you should see the bus system that they have. It is absolutely crazy. One of the things that we saw quite often driving down the road, what you might call a freeway, is just groups of people standing on the side with some money in their hand. They will pay anybody, whether you're riding a bike, riding a horse, in a car, and also what they call a bus. And a bus is, for lack of a better description, I wish I had a picture of it. It's not like an MTS bus that you see. It's a truck that has a flatbed and almost just like a cargo container with windows cut out, put on this flatbed, and they shove as many people in there as they can, and that's their public transportation. And so if there's room on these buses, they'll pay the driver and they can get in, but a lot of times there's no room. So as we were going by on our tour bus, a number of people would like step out into the road and wave the money because they wanted to ride. I got to thinking, how can you schedule your day? You have no idea who or when you're going to get picked up and when you're going to get to your destination. So it's really kind of crazy. Where was I going with that? It was a good story. It's a very good story.
People not getting there.
Yes, transportation. People not getting to, so they couldn't find transportation, or the roads were really bad, or they lived up in the hill country, so they couldn't make it down for the particular graduation. So I think it was about 700 to 750 who we actually gave diplomas to and were able to commission and pray over. And so that's why we were there. Most of the people on the mission trip are familiar with Joshua Nations, friends of the organization. Shad, my brother-in-law, his best friend Heath, sits on the board of Joshua Nations. Heath goes to the same church as Russ Fraze, who's the president of Joshua Nations. And he said to Shad one day, Shad, you need to go to Cuba. Just shut up and go to Cuba. And so Shad went to Cuba, and then he asked me to go the following year. And so that is why I went. We went to go help Joshua Nations graduate 1,000 students from their 2-year Bible training class. The Joshua Nations curriculum, the class itself, is designed as a self-contained resource for encouragement, discipleship, theological education, and inspiration to fulfill God's plan for every student's life. The subjects offered in the curriculum address a wide variety of theological concepts, principles of living, that will give the student foundational principles for ministry and life in Christ. And on the average, the curriculum requires 2 years to complete. In addition to the text, lectures, and exams, all the students are required to serve several hours in their local church for practical ministry application. This is a picture of one of the graduations. There were 8 graduations in all, and they all took place in a host church. And typically the host church had graduates that were graduating from the program. And this is a picture from the stage, or the front, of the students who had received their diploma. And here's another picture, kind of a close-up. And I want you to see here the age difference. I think the youngest one who we commissioned or graduated was 12 years old. And if it took that child or that young person 2 years to do it, when did they start? What age? 10. And then I've seen the topics of that are on the curriculum, and we've seen it, and it's intense. It's a commitment. 10 years old, all the way up to, I'm sure there was an octogenarian in there somewhere. There were some who were well on in years, and so it really ran the spectrum of age, and probably more women than men, but really close to an equal amount, young and old alike. Those who, they were all dressed up in their best, and some of them had jeans and a t-shirt, and some of them had a suit and tie on. So the economic platform ran the spectrum as well. There is the president of Joshua Nations. His name is Russ Fraze, and he is a scream. I wish I could get, I was going to say I wish I could get him here so he could speak to you. No, I wish you could have dinner with him. I wish you could walk around town with him, because he is hilarious. Really, really nice guy. This is a pastor and his wife. They went through the curriculum, started 2 years ago with a bunch of their church members, and they graduated together as well. Here's another church. This is one of the last graduations we did. This was a very big church. I would guess it could probably hold close to 400 or so. There were chairs all up around the balcony, and almost everyone who was there got a diploma because they went through the curriculum. It was a special night, a special service. What we would do as part of the team is, after each group got their diploma, they would come up, and the 15 of us would pray over each and every one and commission them. And that was quite an experience. Of course, I would say 95% of the ones that I prayed for didn't understand English. But here I am, some gringo, praying in English for them. But I don't know about you. I've had people pray with me or for me, or in a group who are praying in Spanish or another language, and I don't understand what they're saying, but the Spirit in me understands what they're saying. You know what I mean? I couldn't translate it, but I just know it's beautiful. So it was an honor to go and pray for them, and I could tell that they were honored as well to be blessed by those who had come from the United States, because it's no small deal to get over to Cuba. Tourism is opening up more and more. But people don't go, hey, where do I want to go for vacation? Oh, I'll go to Cuba. That just doesn't happen. So they knew that we came over at great expense, and it was important for them to see us and to know that America does pray for them, that American Christians love their Cuban brothers and sisters, and not just those who believe, but all of Cuba, all the people of Cuba. So this is a picture of Russ praying, and you can just imagine 15 of us up in front of the stage, and they would come one by one, and as soon as we got done praying for one individual, they would go back and sit down, and another one would come up, and we would pray over them. Not only did we get a chance to do that, but another picture of a group from a particular church getting their diploma. We also had the chance to go to churches in the evening, and when I say evening, when did the church at one time started at 9 o'clock p.m. That's because we got there late. Nothing in Cuba starts on time. It's Cuban time. It's just the way it goes. We broke up in groups of 3 or 4 and went to local churches. We did this when we were in Holguin, and then we did this when we were in Ciego de Avila. We broke up into ministry teams and went to local churches and preached, gave a sermon. And there I am wearing a tie. Don't get any ideas. Although I do look pretty good. They wanted us to dress up in business casual for the graduations, and Shad told me that last year he had brought a couple of ties but didn't wear them. But I thought, you know what, I'll bring them. And then after the first graduation, I saw that a number of the men in the audience, or those who were graduating, had ties on. And you know what, I want to honor them and wear a tie. So on the days that we had a graduation and then we're speaking at night, I wore a tie. So I wore a tie twice in 1 week. I think he did that when I did a wedding and a funeral in the same week. I think that was the only time I've worn a tie twice in the same week. So I got a chance to give a sermon twice, 2 different sermons, 2 different places, and Shad, my brother-in-law, gave a message as well, gave a sermon. His was about 20 minutes and mine was 25. And we probably could have gone longer. They just love meeting together. They love being together. They love hearing God's word. They love being encouraged. And that was the translator there off to the right. So that was an incredible experience. So we commissioned and prayed over the graduates, and then we visited local churches. I got to tell you one story. When we were in Ciego de Avila, this one was in Holguin, but in another church, we left the hotel and we took a taxi. Now this was a taxi, it was a cart attached to a bicycle. Now they do have motorized taxis, but most of the people get around via taxi. It's a BC taxi, which is short for bicicleta, which is a bike, and it's a cart attached to a bike. So I got in one, Shad and Jennifer got in another. Our interpreter was on a bike, and her husband was on a bike, and they were going to follow us all the way to the church. So we leave the hotel, and we travel about 10 minutes, and we get into the city pretty deep, and we come to an intersection, and my taxi goes straight, and I look over my right shoulder, and Shad and Jennifer's taxi, along with the interpreter and her husband, they turn right and are going in a totally different direction. I said, okay, maybe they know a shortcut, and we'll be there when I arrive. Well, that didn't happen. We go another block and stop, and we're at the church, which it really is the pastor's home, and they transformed their patio in the back into a church. And it was actually longer than from here to the door. It was pretty long, probably hold 150 people. It was a big patio, and, decently appointed, bench-like pews. And I walk in, and the pastor's wife is already talking, and I know it's the pastor's wife because I met her afterward. And I come in, and all the heads just turn. And here's this white guy in a tie, right? Doesn't know much Spanish at all. And I walk in, and I'm still looking for Shad and Jennifer. So I sit down, and I have no clue. Did they go to a different church? Did they go to the right church? Did they get lost? Will I ever see them again? Will I ever make it home? Because I don't have an interpreter. And I don't have my brother-in-law and sister. And I'm like, oh. The funny thing is, the logical side of me was, saying this could be bad news because I'm in a place, I don't know where anything is, I don't know who anybody is. My taxi driver is left. I don't know how to get back to the hotel. But the logical side is doing that. But the funny enough, the emotional, the spiritual side was like, this, no problem. Yeah, that's cool. It's going to be all right. And then, and by the time I figured out I was going to be all right, Shaq and Jennifer came in. They had just made a wrong turn, and they came back. And it was such a blessing to minister there and be ministered to. Like I said, the Cuban believers love God. It's because of their relationship with Him they have hope. Because in Cuba there isn't much hope. I'll show you a few pictures and I'll talk a little bit about the conditions there in Cuba, and I'll rattle through these real quick. Just a picture of some housing. This is in Havana, and a lot of the city is like this: narrow streets, tall buildings. And if you do look closely, they're not brand new buildings. It's like time stood still in 1950. They just do not keep up their buildings whatsoever. So people in Havana and in the cities live in these apartment-style buildings. And there's their dryer. Not too many people have washers and dryers like we do. And then there are smaller cities all throughout Cuba. Most of them were like this, where it's just little building after building, and this is where they live. There aren't too many high-rise apartments or tall buildings, except for in Havana and a couple other cities. It's mostly like this. But then throughout the countryside, we would also see homes that were like this. And it looks like a barn or a shack, a place that you might think is deserted, but this is how a lot of Cubans live, especially out on the farms where they work.